Our media task was to create a 1.5 minute long teaser trailer. We aimed to create a Western themed teaser trailer. In order to construct such, our group used various pieces of technology in coherence with one another. Our primary pieces of equipment were a camera, our editing software, and our website. The camera we used was the Canon 80D with two different types of lenses. The first lens was a 18 to 55mm lens, and the second one was a 50mm lens. The reason for using the two different types of lenses was due to the fact that the 50mm lens worked better in low light conditions as the lens allows more light. And for some of the shots I wanted to have a greater depth of field to provide more overall focus on the character. The 18 to 55mm lens was used for the majority of shots, as this lens I could adjust the zoom and the focus, unlike the 50mm lens. This lens was also the main lens used for the majority of the focus pull shots we used, as I could frame the shot the way I wanted and then use the focus pull technique when I switched to manual focus. In combination with such, I experimented with the frame rate of some of the shots, adjusting between 24 frames per second, which is the standard frame rate for a film, and 60 frames per second, to see whether some of our action, close shots would look better, and to use a higher frame rate to create smoother slow motion shots. The primary editing software used was Final Cut Pro 10 on an Apple iMac. Having used Final Cut for my AS work and for other previous projects, I was a fairly experienced user of the software. Firstly, I set up the project to be a 1080p project with 24 frames per second to make the trailer seem as cinematic as possible. We agreed that we wanted to make physical adjustments to the shots that we took. Some of our shots were shaky due to the camera work, and this was simply resolved by applying the stabilization effect on the affected clips. At the beginning, visual editing was what we were most concerned about. This included deciding transitions between clips, whether it be straight cuts or applying smoother transitions such as cross dissolves or fades, implementing titles and logos between clips, slowing down and speeding up some shots, as well as going back to the basics using the blade/trimmer tool to chop and order our clips. After this process was completed, we created a series of compound clips to which we applied filters such as sepia, letterbox, and color corrected some of our clips to suit more to typical Western conventions. We also tried to implement some special effects into our trailer using the software HitFilm Express. We attempted to apply smoke to our gunshots to give it a more realistic feel. The project actually turned out well, and it may have given more realism to the trailer. However, the original clip we thought was a bit boring, and when we attempted to export the clip, there was complications in rendering such. In terms of our audio, we knew from the beginning we wanted to have a voiceover to introduce the setting, story, and the characters. We originally were going to record our diegetic sound directly into Final Cut. However, I was aware that the microphone in the Macs would pick up some background noise that would compromise the cinematic feel of the trailer. Instead, we decided to record using the microphones in our phones and create our own muffler by using a jumper wrapped around the phone. This distilled most of the noise and allowed for a cleaner, crisp voiceover. Our choice of non-diegetic soundtrack was also equally important. Originally, we were thinking to stick to the typical trailer format, with a slow beginning and then lots of action. As our trailer progressed, we realized that our trailer was becoming more indie and more artistic than a typical Hollywood trailer. And this was reflected in our choice of soundtrack. At first, we were going to use the soundtrack from the trailer of the Grand Tour Season 2, as it was fast-paced. However, we then chose to use soundtracks from the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, as these two soundtracks were much slower and reflected both the emotions of our protagonist and allowed for more appreciation of our visual elements. We used the YouTube to MP3 converter to get such, and blended the two tracks together using the fade-in out tool. We then downloaded some sound effects, for example gunshots and explosions, to again create a more realistic feel for our trailer. However, while using such technologies in the construction of our trailer, we encountered a fair amount of problems. For example, the lighting in the bar was very poor, and I tried changing the ISO and the lens to allow for light in to no avail. We also tried having an external light, but this light was a bit harsh and did not look natural. Also, when we exported the film, we noticed that it was rendered differently to the preview and Final Cut. For example, in Final Cut, the sepia tint was not as heavy as in the final edition. This also occurred with our titles. Our logo and the title were the same type of black in Final Cut, but when exported it was apparent there was actually two different types of black, which really annoyed us reviewing the Final Cut. We were also suggested to perhaps implement some CGI into our trailer and use a green screen. The CGI we didn't want to do from the start, as we knew we couldn't get it to the quality that we wanted. It would take us buying professional footage and require skills too advanced for us. The green screen we contemplated doing, mirroring the shot from Jesse James, but this shot we felt didn't really fit within our trailer, although we were fond of it. In terms of our research, we used various online technologies to fuel such. We used Google Forms to create our audience questionnaire and get their opinions on what creates a good trailer. We used YouTube to watch previous A2 trailers like Twisted and Bloodline, and actual teaser trailers like Slow West and True Grit. This was to pick up on conventions of both a teaser trailer and a Western-style film. We documented all our research on our Weebly sites, as well as blogging weekly to remind ourselves of our findings. In regards to our planning, we used Google Maps and listened to our teacher's advice in terms of the locations we should use. As we were shooting a Western film set in 1869, we needed the location to look as authentic as possible. We started to look for lots of open areas such as parks and heaths. We also looked online using Google for a bar to shoot our bar scene. We found 2 bars and decided to go with a bar called Ninth Ward in Farrington. For our props and costume, we primarily used Amazon to order guns, holsters, and hats, which arrived in 2 weeks of purchase. As part of our planning, we took several practice shots for different scenes, as to see firstly the performance of our characters, to ensure we could actually execute the shots, and finally to use some test shots in Final Cut to experiment with special effects. In terms of our ancillary text, we used Adobe Photoshop predominantly to create our film poster and our magazine cover. All 4 of us in our group were inexperienced in using Photoshop, so this proved challenging for us. Despite this, we used online tutorials via YouTube and multiple websites online to intricately craft every layer of the project. We then got to grips using the various tools in Photoshop, such as the lasso tool, fill tool, and the brush tool. We also had to download our font, the Dead Saloon, that was used in our trailer, and apply it to both the magazine and the poster. And finally, for our evaluation element, we used numerous technologies to accumulate our audience feedback. Our first source of quantitative feedback was the likes from YouTube. As of this moment, we have received 12 likes for our trailer and 0 dislikes, indicating a positive reception of our trailer. To obtain more specific and detailed feedback, we set up a Teachers React video based off the Fine Brothers series, as this was to obtain feedback from our target demographic.